If you've been watching a lot of football this year, chances are that you've noticed a guy with a number in the 50s, 60s, or 70s reporting as eligible on the offensive side of the ball. And this, of course, is the standard procedure for when teams want to get a sixth offensive lineman on the field and essentially use him as a tight end. This is also known as jumbo personnel. And if you think that this has gone up this year, you're not crazy. There has been an uptick in the use of jumbo personnel over the course of the 2025 season, and especially over the last 4 or 5 weeks. Now, why is that? On the surface, it might just seem like teams are doing this to get heavier bodies on the field so that they can run the ball more effectively. And certainly some of them are, and to an extent that framing of this is true. But I think the overall answer, if you look at the league as a whole, goes a little bit deeper than that, and not necessarily in a way that you might expect. And it actually goes back and touches on something that I talked about on this channel just a few weeks ago. So stick around to figure out what that is. But first, let me just talk about the use of these sets in general. As these graphs will show you, not only does the usage of jumbo personnel increase in 2025 compared to previous seasons, but it also has increased as the 2025 season has gone along because, as you know, the NFL is a copycat league. But overall, these percentages are still pretty low as it relates to all the plays that are run in the league as a whole, and that's just because only certain teams have really leaned into this. The Steelers, Commanders, Cardinals, and Texans are the first couple teams that come to mind as groups that have used this more than 10% of the time. But recently, the Eagles, the Jags, the Dolphins, and the Bears have begun to use this as a more regular part of their offense because they've gotten some good results out of this. A lot of other teams don't really use jumbo looks at all. But enough teams do this, and enough other teams have at least the option to go to jumbo sets, that I think it's worth looking at the league as a whole and how they're utilizing these looks. And like I said earlier, if you just think intuitively, it would make sense that these looks would be used to run the ball. So let's look into that a little bit deeper. Now, for some teams, this is absolutely about running the football. And the first two teams that come to mind when I think of that are the Steelers and the Eagles. They want to widen defensive fronts to either make the second level defenders cover more ground or have their bigger offensive linemen in these jumbo sets seal off the edge or down block and be able to spring runs to the outside for longer gains. Now, I have two film examples, one from each team here to show you, so let's go into them now. And the first example I will share with you will be the Eagles running duo out of a jumbo set here. And if you follow the channel, you may have seen this play already. And there are some people that might argue that this technically isn't duo because Brett Toth doesn't go to the backside, but I still believe he's responsible for the backside A-gap. There just happens to be nobody there, so him and Tyler Steen end up doubling Dexter Lawrence on this play. At any rate, duo, like other gap scheme runs similar to it, can really be explosive plays if running backs are capable of bouncing these to the outside, even though they're technically supposed to hit between the tackles. And this play ends up being explosive in part because of the jumbo set the Eagles are in. Fred Johnson is the sixth offensive lineman on the right side here, lined up where a tight end typically would be, and because he's a tackle rather than a tight end, he's able to down block number 95 and move him multiple gaps, giving Tank Bigsby a ton of room to operate here on the right side of this run concept and bounce this outside once he sees Deonte Banks shade inside and lose contain. This wouldn't be possible without the use of the jumbo set because Fred Johnson's down block created all of this space for Tank Bigsby to operate in and bounce this duo run for an explosive gain. And now to the Steelers, who fully lean into this stuff by using both 300-pound tight end Darnell Washington and sixth offensive lineman Spencer Anderson in their jumbo sets. Now, Darnell Washington motions over to the right side with Spencer Anderson lined up as almost a wing A-back type on the left side of this play, but Rodgers is then going to motion him to the right side of the line, and Spencer Anderson is going to be the lead blocker on a Zorro toss play here. Now, at a young age, linebackers are often taught to follow the pulling guard, and it gets a little bit more complex at the NFL level when teams are trying to throw misdirection at you and get linebackers out of position to run behind them. But that talking point is amplified at the linebacker position when that pulling guard is now a 320-pound offensive lineman sprinting to the right sideline. You're going to follow that guy to the ball and hopefully get in the way of this run concept. However, Barrett Carter and Logan Wilson both end up over pursuing just due to the threat that these two guys pose as blockers, and they give Jaylen Warren an open cutback lane to turn this run into a big time gain. And then when you zoom out to the league as a whole, teams are running the ball more than they're throwing the ball out of these looks, and they're definitely running the ball at a much higher rate than they are in non-jumbo sets. However, with all that being said, I still kind of think that the reason teams are getting into these looks more often is because they want to throw the ball downfield. And let me explain that a little bit deeper because it might not make much sense on the surface. If you remember my video a few weeks back about the evolution of the slot corner position, you'll remember that I talked about defenses wanting to get into nickel personnel as much as possible. And that's because the use of 5 DBs is very effective at mitigating explosives from the offense. Offenses wised up to this and tried to use 12 personnel more often, but defenses didn't budge. They played nickel to just about everything. And so the next logical step in that from the offensive side of the ball is to put a 6th offensive lineman on the field, and it has worked. Defenses are playing base to that 56% of the time, which is a pretty stark increase from the 26.8% base defense that you get without it. Then, when offenses decide to pass the ball out of these jumbo looks, they're using play action 84.2% of the time. That rate with 5 offensive linemen on the field is only 24.3. And I'll go one step further. The average depth of target out of jumbo is over 10. The average depth of target with 5 offensive linemen on the field is under 8.5. Just to summarize all of that, teams are getting into jumbo and trying to get defenses to play base to it, and then using under center play action to try and throw the ball down the field to generate explosives. Now, is any of this working? If you look at the league as a whole, not really. Both the run game and pass game efficiency of offenses out of jumbo is worse than it is with just 5 offensive linemen on the field. As for the explosive pass rate, like I just alluded to, it's the exact same. It's 7.9%, whether you have 6 offensive linemen on the field or 5 offensive linemen on the field. So you might be asking, why are teams even doing this if the results aren't there? And that's because those numbers that I just showed you are really an average of 2 extremes more so than a representation of the entire league. Of course, all these numbers come with a limited sample size, but teams like the Commanders, Texans, Bears, and Dolphins have been able to really improve their pass games by getting heavy and using that to take shots downfield. While teams like the Steelers, Eagles, Chiefs, Jaguars, and Browns have all been much better running the football when they get 6 offensive linemen on the field. And so I'll make 2 final points here to wrap up this section of the video. 1, these are small sample size numbers. I like this exercise, otherwise I wouldn't be doing it, but I think it's going to be important to look back on this at the end of the year and see which team stuck with this and what the numbers look like for the league as a whole. 2, this stuff, just like everything else, is personnel and execution dependent. Some teams have the personnel to pull this off, but many teams don't have a lot of offensive line talent. A lot of teams are very thin on the interior and at the tackle positions in the NFL, and therefore they don't really have the horses to be able to put an extra guy on the field and continue effectively running or throwing the football. For example, the Steelers are very successful with this stuff because Spencer Anderson is a capable backup and their 3rd tight end is Darnell Washington, who's 310 pounds and blocks like an offensive tackle. Not every team has that, and therefore not every team is going to be able to do this stuff as successfully as other teams will. Just to wrap things up here, this video, along with my last narrative-based video, I hope showed you guys that personnel packages and just seeing who coaches decide to put on the field is a very easy way to tell what direction the league is heading and what teams want their identity to be. I mean, the Buffalo Bills spent the last couple of seasons putting 6 offensive linemen on the field all the time. Now, they stopped doing it this year because they have Jackson Hawes and Reggie Gilliam, but they were trying to tell us something. They were trying to tell us that they wanted to be able to run the football in a way that they weren't able to early in Josh Allen's career. Now, the Rams, for example, would put 11 personnel on the field for like 3 straight seasons because Sean McVay didn't want to give defenses any sort of tell whatsoever. These things matter, and these things are worth following. It is very good for your football experience to be looking at what personnel groupings teams are putting on the field. And as far as jumbo sets go, this is something that I hope everyone who's watching this video is able to follow for the rest of the season, and we can follow this together. I'll be following this, and I'll see what this turns into. It could fizzle out and be nothing, or it could be a big deal by the end of the year and into next season, and that's why I wanted to make a video about it now. So I hope you guys learned something today, and I hope you have something to take with you for the rest of the year and something to watch on Sundays, and I'll leave you with that. Until next time.